Everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another special video. And in today's video, I'm joined by Raphael from Radiant Reality Tarot, and we are diving deep into the energy for 2021. Today's video is actually a clip of the longer, extended 3.5-hour webinar that I did with Raphael back in the summer called Navigating the Big Picture, where we covered the energy of the next 5 years through 2026 using astrology, numerology, and tarot. If you want to learn more about the webinar or watch the full video, you can do so at the link down in the description below. It's a donation-based, pay what feels good webinar, and so that's available to you at any time. And so without further ado, I wanted to just release the video for 2021 since it's coming up really quickly to give you guys a preview of the energy ahead. So I hope you enjoy this, and thank you guys so much.
It's a much different energy. The number 5 is fast, it's dynamic, it's vibrant, it's very passionate, it's very sensual, it's a very visceral number as well. Although it's got a mercurial feel to it, it is highly spirited, it's highly sexed as well, if you want to call it, because it's a very physical number. And it's going to be a very fast, a very dynamic year. One of the other vibrations of 5 energy, believe it or not, is Uranus energy. So we're going to see that as well playing out. It's funny that you mentioned the financial stuff. I don't know if anybody saw them, but I put out a set of 2021 videos for the life path numbers. So based on your life path, I read for the entire year. And one of the things that kept coming up was a change of currency, like change of money, the financial system going in a completely different way. So all of the stuff that we're seeing with crypto, all of the stuff we're seeing with digital currency, with one world money, all of that sort of stuff, whether we like it, whether we want it or not, it's on its way in. And I really think the big initiation point for that is going to be 2021. I think that's going to be where it's kind of like, you know, when you jam something in and it's kind of sat there, it's not quite in the socket, but it's holding. Do you know what I mean? I feel like 2021 is going to be that year for the digital currency. And I think that's where we're going to see that slow, steady progression towards it. With the 5 energy, as I said earlier, we are going to see, which is why it's really interesting to me that you said about the RVs and stuff. We're going to see a lot of movement. We're going to see a lot of travel, especially coming out of a year where everyone was grounded. So in direct response to that, everyone's going to be like, right, now that I can move, now that I can go somewhere, I'm going to do whatever I can to go to different places, to see new stuff. Rule of thumb, 5 being that sort of mercurial energy on one hand, we're going to see a lot more local travel. I think we're going to see people really exploring the places that they live in, you know, and it's one of those things, like I live by train 20 minutes outside of London. Ask me how many times I've been in the last year and a half. You know, it's there, it's on my doorstep. When I want to, I can go, right? So I think what we're going to see next year is a lot of people really exploring the places that they live in, finding out what are the resources in my local area, who can I connect with here, who are the people that are like me in the place that I live. I think we're going to see a lot of open attitudes to a lot more next year as well. So as many of you know, if you've been following me, 5 energy is the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they call it, right? So one of the predictions that I made is 2021 is going to see 420 legalized in the UK. I really think we're going to see that next year. I think we're going to see a lot of different attitudes towards hedonism and recreation in many ways. And I think in part that will be a response to, you know, 2020 was all about the top button being done up, right? And wearing your tie and showing up and doing the work. Whereas 2021 is going to be a lot more relaxed in that respect. So yes, local areas, diving into that sort of stuff. I also feel as well that when it comes to the interconnections between countries, especially cities, my advice to everyone, keep an eye out for the Hyperloop. That's going to be something we're going to be hearing a lot of in 2021, you know, where they can magnetic levitation trains, where they can literally zip you from one country to another in like a fraction of the time that it would have taken before. I think we're going to see let loose and party, someone says. Yeah, I mean, 2021 is going to be your year. Yeah, it's, you know, in that respect, it will be quite interesting. I think the other thing that I've put here as well, change for change's sake. I think we could definitely see a lot more of that energy. I think next year we could see a lot of stuff trying to be progressive, but for almost like its own sake. And the energy behind that 5 energy is new, novel. It's a very technical number. It likes new things, like anything and everything new we're going to see next year. Like one of the predictions that I made for that was, you know, these synthetic meats that are grown in labs. If you,
yeah, I was talking about that too.
right, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. I think
Yes.
we're going to see new food supply, and I think a lot of it will either be very local or it will be like crossbred. Do you know what I mean? Like different.
That's exactly what I've been saying. Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of really good questions that I wanted to kind of touch on before we continue with this. So the first one is, we started talking about this a little bit, or you've started talking about this a little bit, but can you speak about financial reset probability and cryptocurrency adoption, please? And so we talked a little bit about how that's going to start probably in 2021. I would say that almost definitely we'll have a financial reset just because well, I think it's kind of like past due. And from the people that I've spoken to who know about these types of things, they're all saying that, yeah, we're probably going to have a financial reset. I think it's going to be next year is when that's going to start. And you can see they're kind of prepping us for it with like the fake coin shortage and all of that. Like, can't get your change back, don't use cash because they're gonna take the excess, like they're rounding up, right? So if you want to lose extra money, use cash, right? So they're already starting to do that. But I think like what Raphael said, 2021 is when they'll start rolling those things out. I think it'll happen slowly, and then it'll be like push into like full adoption in 2022 when we have the North Node transiting into Taurus and hitting Uranus. And there's going to be eclipses hitting Uranus and Taurus as well. Wow. That's going to be where it's like catapulting us into it, whereas like we're slowly going to be easing into new structures and regulations and forms of currency. That will probably be more 2021. So it'll be slow, and then all of a sudden it'll be like, where did the money go? Like now it's all digital.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree. And like you said, with Mars going into Taurus next year it's like February, right? Can you think about the financial reset probability?
Oh, I just popped up the question. I forgot to do that.
No. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, for me personally, I felt like just from what I got from the year ahead readings that I did for next year, I feel like by the time we get to November 2021, that's when we will really see it sort of kind of hard coded in. I mean, I don't know how much you read, but I've been doing a lot of reading recently off the back of something that somebody said to me. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think it's Ripple have been declared currency. You can see this. Visa have actually bought into that as well. So it's definitely coming. And the idea of cryptocurrency as well, I actually feel like what we're going to see in 2021, it's going to be like, this is where it really kind of hits the masses and starts to take off, but it's not going to really settle in and be completely cemented and kind of set in until we get into the 8 year, which I think is 2024.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I do think though in 2022 some like countries will full on adopt it, and that's going to be like a thing. But I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin or some sort of decentralized currency. My thoughts on cryptocurrency are very different than a lot of people in the alternative community. I think it's a little bit of a psyop to get people who would be very, very, very against the digital currency to all of a sudden be like, Yeah, cryptocurrency. I love digital currency. So your mind's already wrapped around it. So the people that would be normally most resistant to it are the people that are like really gung ho about it.
Yeah.
That to me is interesting. Also, we don't really know how Bitcoin originated, who actually created it. It's like this like weird murky area. And that was really the first major digital currency. So I'm skeptical of those things. And I think if there is a cryptocurrency, it's going to be like a centralized cryptocurrency. It's going to be the same as like the fiat currency system, except it's just going to be digital, which is not great.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I hope that I'm wrong.
No,
and that we get a centralized cryptocurrency and that doesn't get squashed and like regulated in the way that I think it probably will next year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, I think a lot of what kind of takes place with that sort of stuff, it's like anything, they'll desensitize you enough to it. You know, if you constantly expose something to somebody, eventually it just becomes commonplace, right? And then you kind of accept that it's going that way. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of at the moment. The feeling that I kind of got from it as well was that cryptocurrency was going to take over what the stock market currently is. And they're going to phase that.
It's been, kind of like that. Like people invest, it's all these like short-term investments and people doing all these like crazy things and using technology. And it's the same as the stock market. Like at this point, people are trading cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, absolutely. So next year, things that you probably want to embrace, look after your physical body. The 5 year is a very physical year. So go dancing, go skiing, do Tai Chi, do yoga, all of those kind of things where you're moving your body and bringing some sort of awareness into your body. That's going to be really important for your 5 year. If you are single and free, I think we're going to see a lot of community type stuff pop up next year. I think we'll probably be seeing a lot of hostile kind of energy as well. Maybe not full on YMCA, but I think definitely things that, you know, alongside that kind of energy. I think the other thing that you can do for next year as well, it's very much, the 5 year is very much a jump or you'll be pushed. That was kind of the energy that you really need to adopt next year, which is interesting because you mentioned there's quite a strong Uranus energy in that year. And I think we're, you know, that Uranus is very much a, you know, either you jump or I'm going to push you. You know, so it's getting in with that for sure. And really finding new and novel ways to do everything that you're already doing, because the world is going to change so fast next year. And I think people that struggle to adapt are going to find it hard to, I think 2021 is going to leave behind the people that aren't really nimble of mind. So, you know, do whatever you can to get into that sort of mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with like the cryptocurrency thing, a lot of people don't like it. It's going to hurt a lot of people, but it's a thing that where if you're going to function in society, it's almost like you're going to have to do it. And so it's kind of, you know, how do you toe that line? How do you navigate that? And are you going to be able and willing to navigate that? Like, it's going to be like that with a lot of different things. Because there's a lot of people in the comment section that are like not trusting the cryptocurrency and not wanting that and saying how it'll be bad for like elderly and homeless populations. I completely agree. How are homeless people going to use a cryptocurrency unless they chip everyone, which is a whole nother situation that can be, I think microchips are going to be like a bigger issue in 2021, 2022 than ever. And I talked about this in 2017 when I started talking about Uranus and Taurus. This is the time when that's really activated. So there's going to be a lot, and it's going to be like, are we going to allow that to happen as a society? And if that does happen, how are we going to adapt? Will we adapt? And those are questions that I think are kind of yet to be answered. I hope that people will, you know, be sovereign minded enough to, you know, take things into their own hands and to not allow things to be misused in a way that's very deliberate and sinister. But seeing what's been going on more recently, you know, I'm not 100% sure that that will be the case, I guess, because I think a lot more people are willing to submit when they're afraid than what I thought in my head.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think a lot of that, you see that. And that's where I think for me, I mean, I'm an Aquarius, so I'm naturally a conspiracy nut. It goes with the territory of the sun sign. But yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is where when you kind of look at those things and the way that they play out with people and the way that people then start to behave or what they will accept in the face of such overwhelming odds or things that create such fear, that's when you start to see the underbelly. And it's where you kind of can say, well, actually, you know what, there is an agenda, because otherwise what's the need in, you know, to drive people to this or to constantly bombard them with things that are going to make them more susceptible or open to choosing things that they would have flat out refused previously. You know, and that's where you can kind of see that it's been driven somewhere. I mean, I always hope, you know, that's that hopeless optimist in me. I always hope that a lot of it is really to get all of us as a society to a better place. But yes, a lot of this stuff can be misused. 5 energy, I think as well, when it comes to you know, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll energy that I was talking about, I think we may very well see some sort of legalization of the sex trade, or certainly see it be a lot broader in its application. I think we might see a reform in that. One of the things that I have to say I'm kind of seeing at the moment that really troubles me is a lot of the stuff that they are trying to pass off as a sexual identity. Or do you know what I mean? Like some of that stuff is really worrying to me. And I'm not talking about people that are, you know, non-binary or anything like that. I'm talking about the darker sides of things like that, you know, and what they're trying to, you kind of get where I'm going with this, right? And
I believe you're probably talking primarily about pedophilia.
Yes. And this whole idea of trying to normalize that and call it a sexual identity, that part of the 5 energy, it really does kind of make me it makes me very uncomfortable, because you can't explain that away in my opinion. There's no excuse. You just can't. There's nothing about that that I am prepared to accept as being normal. And I think I think that will probably be the final line. I think that's where we'll see a lot of kickback. And this idea of our freedoms, because 5 energy is free. It wants freedom. It wants movement. It wants all of that. Where we're being restricted or enforced on stuff in the 4 year, next year there'll be none of that. And where they try to impose too much of it, that's where I think all of the people at the top are going to see the big kickback. That's where the supposed sheeple are going to say, well, you you know, we're going to show you actually we're the majority and you're the minority.
Everyone in the chat room is getting chills talking about this, including me. So I think you're spot on and onto something. And we're already starting to see that come up a lot this year. And one of the things too that I talked about with Ksenia a long time ago was that I think it's the Pluto-Jupiter energy, or maybe it was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, but it's associated with the slave trade and like the sex trade. And so she was talking before this even started to become like big news all over the place about these things becoming big news all over the place. And it's definitely starting to come up this year. And I do think we'll see a continuation of that. And it makes sense, a mercurial year, right? That's like a childlike type of energy. Yeah. And so let's look a little bit at what's going on astrologically here. But I do think that probably would be the point of like pushback. I mean, that's
I think that's where
but the average person is not okay with that.
No. And this
no
is the
way.
thing, like the majority of the average person, they can accept a lot. I think that's the point where they would all kind of turn around and say like, oh, hell fucking no. Sorry. I'm very like, this is something I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I'm kind of like, I know that collectively that would be the point where we said, look, you've pushed it too far now, and this is where it ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julie says, if that isn't the point, then what on earth is, right? Like there has to be a point where people say, no, enough, like we're done with this. Yeah. And I think next year will be that point for a lot of people. There's a lot of rebellious energy. I mean, Uranus is involved. I think that they're going to be pushing a lot on us collectively. And I'm so glad that this chat room is so open to these concepts and ideas. I think a lot will be pushed on us in terms of new structures, new paradigms, new technologies. And I think there will be a lot of resistance. It's like they're wanting to bunker down. They're wanting to restrict internet and censor what we saw with internet censorship that came up when Uranus or when Saturn dipped into Aquarius. We're going to see that 20-fold next year. I think people are going to be absolutely like at their wits end. Like, no, I can't access anything on any of these websites. All my favorite YouTube channels are down. Like, they might even like block certain things on the internet. Like, people are going to be like, no, that's enough. The internet is our free space. This is where we get information. There's going to be a lot of backlash with that. And I think with a lot of the things that they're going to be rolling out with new technology and new rules, regulations, laws, people are going to be pushing back against that. So I think we will see a rebellious energy, but we'll also see a pushback against that rebellious energy. So I think, like, you know, militarization of the police was for a reason, specifically for this time period. Like, I think that there's been a kind of a plan to make a lot of changes around this time. And there's an understanding that when those changes are made, people are going to resist, people are going to rebel, people are going to, you know, be out in the street.
In that respect is very military kind of energy as well. Yes. It's quite martial. So yeah, you absolutely get that for sure.
Yeah, especially at the start of the year, that Mars in Taurus. I mean, and what you were looking at. So let's look at some of those time periods. You talked about March, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But the times that I'm like really interested in 2021 are May, November, and July. So I'm wondering, maybe you could pull a few cards for May, because that's kind of where I feel like we're at our breaking point. Jupiter enters Pisces, and then next year, the next couple of years too, there's some interesting energy with Jupiter and Pisces and Jupiter with Neptune.
Yeah.
My sense is that it's kind of like this energy of like, yeah, much more compassion, much more openness, spirituality becomes more a central focus, but it's also like savior consciousness, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, having this delusion that someone's going to come save us. You know, we already have that a lot, but I think that's going to increase. And so, yeah, so basically what's going on next year, we have this big energy at the start of the year. In May, Jupiter starts to enter Pisces. I'm wondering if you have some insight. We can pull some cards about Jupiter in Pisces in that whole period, which is going to be about a year long.
All right. So I tell you, you can choose when you're ready, just say when, and I will go straight in. As always, I want to bless my deck of cards with all forms of love, light, peace, prosperity, and abundance. And I hope that whatever messages come through are ultimately clear and concise, and they help us all on our path to our highest vibrational good.
All right, when?
All right, so we've got the Ace of Pentacles. There's the money stuff that we're talking about, right? The big financial moves and changes. And aces are always new beginnings, right? This is where we do something new, where we initiate something new. The Ace of Pentacles as well is the foundational powers of the material world, right? So Jupiter in Pisces is at home. Right, that's where its ancient ruling sort of association was. So it's really interesting. We're going to see, I think, on a collective level, a new understanding about what we truly value and what we're going to start to see the movement towards when it comes to those things. Then we've got the Three of Cups, and I like the Three of Cups. It's actually a really nice card. But what it kind of suggests to me is as well, a lot of people, are, as much as we felt heavy, restrained and restricted here in 2020, next year people are going to want the opposite. And I kind of feel like that's where we're going to get the surreptitious energy, where does hedonism become too much? You know, oh, but we're all enjoying ourselves. We just want to feel good. And it's like, okay, but that's fine.
It's so Jupiter and Pisces.
Right? Absolutely. And there comes that kind of almost, well, okay, now you're pushing it a little bit too far, right? So it's very interesting that Three of Cups comes up. And then we've got the Five of Swords, right? Which is a completely different energy to the other two cards that come up, because that Five of Swords is going to see the clash of words. That's where the ideas that are forced on us don't feel sorry, wrong card, where the ideas that are forced on us don't feel quite as good as the people that are pushing those ideas want us to feel about it. Do you know what
that makes sense? Because Jupiter and Pisces, our intuition is going to be like,
Yeah.
And also that's an escapist energy, overindulging in things that feel good because we felt so crappy for so long as like a collective. And that's one of the other things I wrote in my notes that I'm a little concerned about. Like Jupiter and Pisces, great energy, it'll feel better, but where is it crossing a line there?
Right, where is the cutoff point? And I think we'll see a lot of this next year. I think we'll see a lot of indulgence when it comes to drugs, when it comes to those sorts of things, for sure. I think we'll see a lot of legalization in a lot of places when it comes to that stuff. Yeah, really interesting. I mean, Jupiter in Pisces is going to be lovely because it will give us that powerful intuition. And I'm hoping that, you know, because Jupiter has that protective element to him, right? And Jupiter is a protective, a benevolent force. And actually, I think in ancient astrology, he was the protector of children as well, right?
Oh, yeah, I believe so.
And then that
versus Kronos, who's Saturn, who's the eater of children.
Just gonna pick them up and chuck them in, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then with the Piscean energy of it as well, I think we're going to see that almost like that collective pull towards, you know what, yes, it's great to enjoy ourselves, which is absolutely fine. And I think this is what everybody needs. But where is it that we need to not necessarily regulate it, but keep an eye on it before it gets to the point where it needs to be regulated?
Yeah.
That
makes sense. And, you know, that's where that Saturn coming into Pisces, like, I think the following year, does that happen in 2022 or 2023? Yeah. I got to remember what's going on here. I think that's where the Saturn in Pisces comes into play is, yeah, so that's in 2023 is the regulation of those overindulgences and escapist types of things, which could be drugs, alcohol, entertainment, you know, even regulations on like spirituality and religions. I feel like we're going to get a lot of cults coming up in 2021, 2022.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's like a cult energy because people are looking for someone to save them. They're looking for an out. They're looking for something that's going to help them without having to put in so much work. And it makes sense. It's like every action has a reaction, like an equal and opposite reaction. We've just had so much hard work, so much restriction. This is the like opposition to that, where people are like, someone do this for me, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, isn't it? We have this as a collective, this tendency to put it off onto somebody else. And I think we're stepping out of that. You know, I really do feel by the time we get into 2022, I think we will start to be collectively more responsible for where we go, for the things that are happening. What was the next transit that you wanted to look at? I'll pull some.
Oh, yeah. So we talked about, so July, I know that you were interested in because you were getting like a lot of weird stuff coming up. And June is actually when Saturn squares Uranus, but Mars in July activates that. So it's still very exact, especially at the start of July. Yeah. And Mars is actually going to be squaring Uranus and opposing Saturn. And so the two of the time periods that you picked out are very heavy Mars activations of the Saturn-Uranus square, which is July and November. And so to me, this is like, so basically in January, out the gate, they're going to start implementing some new like currency things, some new technologies with food and the supply chain and like all sorts of different things. There's going to be a lot of changes that they're going to want to start slowly rolling out and restructure, involving technology, food, currency, especially, and probably the internet and, you know, the way that that's regulated right out the gate in January. We'll see hints of that, if not like a big push to that. And then in July, I think that amps up quite a bit. And this is also an energy that could be rebellion. This could be protests. This could be like violent protests and, you know, things that get really intense, and especially militarization, you know, of the police force and military being called in to kind of, you know, squash whatever's going on protest wise, like violence and aggression, especially from martial forces, which is, you know, the military and the police force, and Saturn, which is the people that are, you know, controlling the hierarchy, that rules, regulations, restrictions. The military is very Saturnian and martial. And so I could see military action being taken. Maybe it's having to do with protests, but it could also be having to do with something else, like more on a broader scale around this time. And also in November, that's another point of that. So I'm kind of wondering what you were kind of picking up on with this, and maybe we could do some cards on this too, because it seems like kind of a pivotal energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and those were the months for me. It was when I did the 2021 readings, that what kept coming up was March, which is just after, right? June, no, March, July, and November of 2021. Those were where I kept seeing just repeating patterns of hard energy, possibly very volatile energy as well, like really big movements, really big changes. And possibly really big clashes as well. It's interesting that this year was kind of ruled by Saturn, and 2021 seems to be ruled by Mars and Uranus. You know, it's like it's kind of their energy then, isn't it, when we step into that?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Right.
And I mean, on a personal level, if you have a lot of fixed energy, like this would be a time that would be very challenging in terms of there's a lot of changes. You're going to want them to happen immediately, and they're going to take time and work. And it's kind of like, I'm sick of time and work. I want this to happen now. I want what I want when I want it. And a lot of people with a lot of fixed energy. So that's, again, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo. They're going to be in that phase. It's like, I'm going to do this now, and they're going to be pushing up against a lot of walls. Yeah. And so that's a part of the energy too on an individual level.
Yeah. I have a lot of fixed energy. So thanks for the heads up. All right. When you're ready, let's pull some cards.
Okay. All right. Let's do it.
All right. So we've got the Six of Swords. There's that movement that I kept seeing. And that's an interesting one, because your Six of Swords can sometimes be where the movement of energy takes place as well. So I think a lot of the energy around travel, fuel sources and stuff, I think we're going to see a lot of debates about that. I think we could probably see, you know, this might be about oil. It might be about petrol. It might be about the fuel sources that we're using, that we start to see a big shift take place. I mean, certainly by the time we get to, I think it's like 2024, oil's dead. It's redundant. We've seen that, right? And even in the astrology. Then we've got the Nine of Cups. So this kind of feels like that moment when I'm looking at these cards, you know, when you have a scab and you know that it's healing, but it's itching and you can't help but leave it. You can't help but sort of scratch at it and poke at it, but you know you should leave it to heal. I kind of feel like that's what July is going to be, or this moment of this chart that we're looking at. And then we've got the Temperance card, right, which is that very Sagittarian energy. It's very much about the higher ideals, but it's also about the healing journey. And you see this, the Nine of Cups and the Temperance card, that represents people in the medical profession. So I think we could see a lot taking place there, especially with the Six of Swords. So this could be some kind of regulation around, you can only treat these people if they have their chip. You can only treat
or the vaccine.
Or the vaccine, or right. And you saw me shuffle the card. I got goosebumps right now.
I have too. And with that Jupiter in Pisces, Jupiter just entering into Pisces. Pisces rules hospitals and the medical system. The medical system right now, especially in the United States, is like collapsing. Like so many hospitals, you guys, are about to almost like go completely under and close their doors because of the lockdown. It's not because they were overrun with coronavirus patients. It's because nobody was going to the hospital and they were shutting the hospitals down. And that's a big thing. I think this is going to be an expansion of the medical system with Jupiter and Pisces, and that Uranus in Taurus energy with that square to Saturn in Aquarius. I've been thinking that that's like an energy around medical technology and potentially vaccinations. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think we could see a big drive towards that kind of thing. I think the other thing with the Temperance card as well, because Temperance wants to find the balance, right? It wants to find that way that this can all work for everybody, but also it's about what we pave the way for, what we allow to manifest in our lives. And this chart in July, I mean, those T-squares they're really strong. You know, like I'm just looking at those and I'm thinking, okay, so we've got a lot of that Taurus concentration. So that's the environment, you know, what is distributable. And then on the other side of it, we've got sort of that Leo Aquarius energy that comes in as well, that kind of says, well, you know, the individual says that it wants this, but as a collective, this is all we can do. You know, so it's interesting to see that. And I think we could probably see that when it comes, because Mercury energy is all about your skills, right? So when it comes to learning medicine, you know, people that are coming up that want to go into the medical field, I'll be really interested to see how heavily they are kind of like, if you want to be in the medical field, you've got to play ball by this, this, and this.
That's so interesting. Just as a side note, because of the reading that you did for my husband, who is going to be going to NP school, who has changed his mind. But
that's great. It
fits with what you were talking about with him, though, on a personal level. So yeah, if you guys are in the medical field, expect a lot of changes. And somebody else was asking, and maybe you can pull some cards for this too, that I wanted to pull up. Let me find the question here, but where'd all the questions go? Oh, they're there. Basically, the question was like, so when schools open up this fall and maybe into next year, are they going to stay opened up? My sense is actually yes, but with a lot of modifications. You know, you're having the North Node in Gemini, that's like a new system or a new way of doing like early childhood education. And yeah, a lot of people, like individually parents, will be having their children homeschooled and take classes online, but the school system, they don't want that closed, you guys. Like that is where they unfortunately do a lot of the conditioning and indoctrination and brainwashing, unfortunately. I know a lot of parents have to send their kids to public school. I'm not faulting anyone for that. I mean, it makes sense. There's not everyone can homeschool their kids or send their kids to like private educators and things like that. But I really cannot see from my perspective, and also what I'm seeing astrologically. I mean, the North Node in Gemini, there's going to just be a lot of changes to the education system, and those changes might not be so great. They might be a little overkill, like they go too much with the change and then they have to kind of backtrack and rein it back in. But yeah, I think the schools will probably stay open this time, but I'm not 100% clear on that. So I was wondering, Raphael, do you have anything to say? Because a lot of these people are parents.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you all for being here, because the fact that you're here at this webinar means that you are open to different ideas, that you have a deep understanding that there are other ways to do things. It means that you're open to the idea of raising conscious, beautiful, wonderful children that are going to go on to create the world that we're all hoping to see. So for all of you that are here, I've got my little shiver again, for all of you that are here that are parents, I just want to say a massive thank you from us to you for being those wonderful people and agents of change as well. That's where we start. In terms of what you need to know about the schools, Heather, please, when you're ready.
Okay.
All right, so we've got the Death card. All right, then we've got the Knight of Wands. That's really interesting. And then we've got the Eight of Swords. So I'm going to be really honest with you. I kind of see it being a very, very, a very blended learning kind of experience. Now, the Death card always represents kind of like a Noah, where something comes to a completion. So this idea of traveling or going to school kind of comes to an end. However, you've then got the Eight of Swords, right? So I kind of feel like we are going to see schools stay open, but I feel like their numbers and their populations are going to be smaller. I think a lot of the stuff that happens, it's going to be, part of the week you're at school, part of the week you're at home. I think we're going to see massive reform when it comes to the teachers. I think a lot of what teachers have been saying about what children actually need versus what the curriculum says that they can offer, I think we're going to see a big backlash there, because that Eight of Swords kind of suggests there's some sort of idea of it's too rigid. It doesn't allow that creativity. It doesn't allow freedom of expression. We know this, right, from the schooling and the education system. So I do believe that it's going to change, but I feel like it's going to be more of a blended learning kind of energy. And I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I'm sorry to say this, just as I was looking at those two alone, I do see militarization or marshalling of schools. I think they're going to be a lot more tightly controlled, i.e., You know, we talked about that. We had this talk about teachers having guns, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think we are going to see it. How much it actually holds, I'm not entirely sure. I think, if anything, that death card actually tells me that the whole thing is going to be very, very different by the time we get to not just the end of next year, but by the time we get to the end of this paradigm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense in terms of what we're seeing here and what astrologically has been happening and is coming up for us. And the one thing I would just like to add to that is that Suzanne said, you know, that she is a teacher. She doesn't recall training or stifling her students. And we're not talking about teachers specifically. If you guys are teachers, you're probably helping more than anything else because the system is broken. And I'm sure you know, as teachers, that you struggle, you know, with the rules, regulations, restrictions, the way that things are currently in the public education system, especially. I know from a lot of people that I've spoken to that it's not easy to be able to teach your students in the way that you might want to. And so it's not a personal attack on you. It's me saying that I believe the system is broken and it's set up in a way that's kind of specific. But as individual educators, I'm sure you guys do whatever you can to help your students flourish and to see things in a more open-minded way. So thank you guys for all of that, all of you that are doing that, because that's important work as well.
Yeah, it really is. It's so true as well what you say, because they have a really hard time. You know, they've got all these targets to meet and all of these crazy numbers and everything. And it's like, well, I just want to teach my kids so that they're good at what they do. And, you know, they've got skills to go out into the world with. You know, your targets don't really help them. And you see that a lot with teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so do we want to talk a little bit about November? Do we think that's going to be, it looks like a similar energy. It's Mars is, instead of being in Leo, it's in the sign of Scorpio. And so it's making a square to Saturn. That T-square isn't as tight because of Uranus being at 12 degrees, Saturn's at 7 degrees, but it's still there. It's still within orb. And this does seem like another dicey time, also especially because the sun is also in Scorpio. And so the sun will be forming a T-square during that time period as well. Yep. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting time period. And then we'll move on to some questions into some other years.
Sorry. So yeah, because November was where I saw the big currency stuff taking place. In the readings that I did, that's where I kind of thought, yes, this is where that new currency is definitely going to be in place by now. This is what they're really going to be pushing on us. And whether it works or not, it's kind of going to be there. It's going to be very prevalent. When you're ready, just say when.
When?
Okay, so we've got the Queen of Wands. So that's where the lines are going to be drawn. Then we've got the Two of Swords. And then we've got the Seven of Wands. So yeah, we're definitely going to see a big change of some sort of, and I feel like it will be to do with the currency. But interestingly enough, that Two of Swords kind of says by this point, a lot of people will be starting to, you know, even people that weren't necessarily, and I say this with all love, but people that weren't necessarily awake, I think even those people will start to question, hang on a sec, what's going on here? I think this is another one where we're going to see that kickback with so much Scorpio energy taking place as well. I think this is where a lot of stuff tends to be uncovered, right? Like, do you remember Jupiter in Scorpio and all the stuff that came out then? I think we're going to see more of that next year in November. I think it's going to be to do with the finances, and I definitely think it's going to be about where a lot of things are being driven. That Queen of Wands also suggests that we're going to, I think we're going to see a lot more women coming forward when it comes to finance. I think November's going to be a time where, I mean, and I said this from when Uranus entered into Taurus, if women run the banks, we never would have had the crashes.
The right women.
Well, yeah.
If it's women that are of the same mindset of the current paradigm, which a lot of women who are in those positions are, then it's probably not going to make much. It's just like my friend Griselda always says, the emperor changing clothes, you know, like same emperor, different clothes, same rulership, different facade. But yes, I agree though. Like if there were more of a maybe receptive feminine sort of energy and approach to these types of things,
Yeah, for sure.
it might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Saturn in there as well. We've still got Jupiter in Aquarius. That's nice. And then at that point as well, the moon's going to be there. And I mean, I always like Moon Saturn because even though it's quite emotional, it helps you rationalize those emotions. You know, it helps you kind of make sense of them and say, look, okay, you know what? Maybe I can't necessarily do anything about the way that I feel about it, but I can look at it objectively and say, right, okay, what is the best course of action here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's just for this like little 2-day period, but you know, it's a part of this T-square when it comes exact. So it is amplifying that energy.